Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Joe Belch, and I serve as the interim Thomas and Evelyn Page Dean of the Fowler College of Business at San Diego State University. Welcome to our President's Lecture Series in conjunction with the Charles W. Hostler Institute on World Affairs. We're honored to host the Hostler Institute in the Fowler College, where we take a global mindset toward all of our programs. The Hostler Institute supports coursework and activities surrounding international diplomacy and global business, student study abroad, and international research. Following the presentation, there will be time devoted to questions and answers. Please submit your questions for Ambassador Roz in the Q&A panel on the lower right side of the screen. We will try to get to as many of your questions as we can. I am delighted that so many of you have joined us today for this event, which is offered to our students, faculty, staff, and community, and in proud partnership with the San Diego State University Office of the President. It's now my honor to introduce San Diego State University President, Dr. Adela de la Torre. Dr. de la Torre is the first woman and first Latina to serve as a permanently appointed president of San Diego State University. She joined SDSU in June 2018 after a distinguished career within the California State University system, the University of Arizona, and the University of California, Davis. An accomplished economist, health researcher, and higher educational leader for more than 3 decades, President de la Torre is known for her authenticity and collaborative approach to leading by listening and example. I will now turn the program over to President de la Torre.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Belch. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending the fall lecture for the Charles W. Hostler Institute on World Affairs and President's Lecture Series. I'd like to provide special acknowledgement and thanks to Mrs. Chenye Hostler. Chenye has long been a champion of this annual gathering, which encourages open dialogue about important global issues of our day. Thank you, Chenye, for your compassion-driven philanthropy and for continuing to support these meaningful interactions. I would also like to provide a special welcome to Adela Raz, Ambassador of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the United States. Additionally, I send a special thank you to SDSU's vice presidents, deans, other campus leaders, and all our faculty for encouraging students to engage in dialogue and inquiry, and for developing and sustaining forums for intellectual conversations. For those of you who are new to this special series, I will first offer a brief history about the Charles W. Hostler Institute on World Affairs, which plays a critical role in the educational mission of SDSU. The Institute was founded in 1942 as the Institute on World Affairs to inform students, faculty, and the wider public on global affairs. Since its inception, the Institute has been guided by its operating motto, "Let the other side be heard." Over the decades since 1942, and through the many fluctuations in our national and global political climates, this motto has remained both important and relevant, whether it be in classrooms, in our places of work, in our places of services, and any other time we come together recognizing our differences. I will repeat the motto once more: let the other side be heard. The Institute now holds in reverence the names of Charles W. Hostler, former U.S. ambassador to Bahrain, who endowed the Institute in 2004. Mrs. Chenye Hostler, who will speak shortly, carries on the legacy of distinction and goodwill. Born and raised in Taiwan, Chenye moved to the United States to pursue higher education. She started out at Columbia University and later relocated to San Diego, where she attended and graduated from our great institution, San Diego State University. After working for large financial companies for many years, she established an important import and export business, which took her to several parts of the world. During that time, she came to realize her passion for travel and learning about different cultures. The Charles W. Hostler Institute on World Affairs has provided our university and greater San Diego community with high-level and spirited intellectual engagement on a rich diversity of international issues and controversies. The Institute has hosted distinguished speakers from around the world that have included ambassadors, Nobel laureates, and world leaders. Please join me in welcoming a visionary leader who seeks to make the world a better place, Mrs. Chenye Hostler.
Mrs. Hostler, would you be able to unmute?
Somebody unmuted me. Is it okay now?
Yes,
is.
we can hear you. We can hear you, Jenny. But no, she's muted again. Can someone unmute Chenye, because we cannot hear her?
Yes, we're asking her to unmute, and I believe.
I just did. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, President De La Torre, for your kind words. Madam Ambassador, we're honored and delighted you'll be giving a presentation at the Joint President and Charles Hostler Institute on World Affairs Lecture Series. The Hostler Institute will be celebrating its 80th anniversary next February. Your impressive accomplishments speak for themselves, and I truly admire your integrity, honesty, and bravery. You are an inspiring model for not only Afghan women, but women around the world. We're looking forward to hearing your insights and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hostler. It is now my distinct honor to introduce our distinguished speaker, Adela Raz, who currently serves as the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan Ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Raz began her career with the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan and continued to work in several positions at international development organizations in the United States and Afghanistan. Ambassador Raz possesses more than a decade of extensive experience in political and economic analysis, policy development, media and communication, and governance. Throughout her career, Ambassador Raz has worked with various Afghan governmental agencies, nonprofit organizations, and local and international organizations. Today, she also serves as a designated non-resident ambassador to Argentina, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, and also to Colombia. From December 2018 until earlier this year in July 2021, Ambassador Raz served as Afghanistan's first female permanent representative and ambassador to the United Nations. She was a vice president of the 75th session of the General Assembly and was appointed by the president of the General Assembly to serve as the General Assembly's co-coordinator on COVID-19 related initiatives. Prior to her appointment to the United Nations, Ambassador Raz was a deputy minister for economic cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during a period that spanned 2016 to 2018. During her appointment, Ambassador Raz contributed to and led efforts in the two major Afghanistan-centered regional cooperation platforms, the Regional Economic Cooperation Conferences on Afghanistan and the Heart of Asia Istanbul process. In 2013, she served as the first female deputy spokesperson and director of communications for President Hamid Karzai. After President Ashraf Ghani took office in 2014, he appointed her as a chief of staff of the Administrative Office of the President. Ambassador Raz holds a Master of Arts degree in Law and Diplomacy with a focus on economic development from the Fletcher School at Tufts University. She holds a triple Bachelor of Arts with honors in International Relations, Political Science, and Economics from Simmons University in Boston. She also obtained a certificate in International Development from the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest, Ambassador Adela Raz.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President De La Torre. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And thank you to Dr. Belch and Ms. Hostler for setting the scene so very nicely. Finally, thank you to San Diego State University, especially the Charles Hostler Institute and Ms. Nancy for putting today's event together. It's truly a pleasure to be here with you all. I understand that today's event is entitled Afghanistan, A View to the Future. At this exact moment, when we are in such challenging circumstances and at a very critical juncture for Afghanistan's future, this is an especially interesting topic to discuss. If you had asked me about Afghanistan's future a few months ago, my answer would have been definitely very different. And if you would have asked me A little over 20 years ago, during the last Taliban era, my answer would have been different as well. So before jumping into my view of Afghanistan's future, from the perspective of today, I want to begin by exploring the past in order to provide some context. I was born in Afghanistan during the peak of the fighting between the Soviets and the Mujahideen. I grew up in the context of war and was still a young girl when the Taliban took power 25 years ago. Very quickly after the Taliban took charge in the 90s, I was robbed, like many other Afghan girls, from my right to go to school and forced to stay at home. Growing up in a family that valued education above all else, this was especially devastating. But I still hoped for a change, like so many other Afghans did. Taliban's rule lasted 5 long years, but every year we managed to convince ourselves that next year something would be different. Next year something would change. We believed that the oppression of the voice of the people simply could not be sustainable. It was this hope that gave us the strength and encouraged us to continue to pursue our future, despite our terrible present. I knew that the key part of preparing for the future was education. Without an educated population, Afghanistan's future would be crippled, which we have seen in the past. I was able to study in secret at home and run a secret home school teaching young girls. Too many girls who were banned from going to school during the Taliban era were years behind in their curriculum when they re-enrolled after 2001. I'm so honored to say that the girls that I worked with during the time were all able to rejoin school in the age-appropriate grade. So technically they had not missed anything the way I had missed 5 years of my school. They did not lose those years of lives. Without their hope for a brighter future, they might not have been so dedicated to their studies, which meant there was still hope and we still thought of a brighter future. But hope sustained us and led us to manifesting a brighter future through our actions. Following the intervention in 2001, Afghanistan began an incredible journey, which often moved forward in impressive leaps and bounds despite the many obstacles, especially for Afghan women. Women's rights improved drastically, especially the right to education and the right to work. Freedom of speech and press flourished in the region, and our civil society provided a strong foundation for Afghan society. We were cautious, but Afghans still had a confident belief in democracy. This was a future crafted by the Afghan people for the Afghan people. Family by family, individual leaders by leader, Afghan works to change society and move forward into a new Afghanistan, the Afghanistan that I was always proud of. What I view as the 4 pillars of this new Afghanistan are women, youth, civil society, and media, who are the actual and the real drivers of the change. This was the reality in Afghanistan when Kabul fell on August 15. The rapid collapse shattered our optimism and, of course, our hope. Afghans are now in the most unpredictable and very difficult situation. In very dark days, not our allies or our partners or people of Afghanistan, we all feel grim, sad, and unhappy. But one thing is very important that we should not lose, it's the hope. The weight of the loss is enormous. We're only just now beginning to more fully process our pain and move from grief to action. As we do, I see 3 potential courses of action unfolding. First, death. I fear Taliban may not be able to adapt to the reality of the new Afghanistan. The new Afghanistan where women were in the forefront of the society. The new Afghanistan where youth had taken the lead. the new Afghanistan, where our civil society prospered and became very dominant and engaged and vocal. The new Afghanistan, where our media was the strongest and it still is the strongest compared to all the challenges they are facing in our region. This is the new reality. 25 years ago, when Taliban came to Afghanistan, it was a different country. We were in the middle of a civil war. The civil war had not ended. And today, it's not, that is not the story. So we hope, and our expectation is that what if they do adopt to today's reality, if the adoption happens and they're able to make the right type of change that the society desires, I think there might be still hope. But the reality is, I don't know how actual and how truthful that thought would be, because so far what we have seen in last few months, there has been less tolerance for women's education. We still see women are banned from going to school in majority of the country. We still see women are banned from going to work in majority of the cities and in most of the country. That's where I think it makes us to be more cautious to expect, how do we see the future? We also see that, unfortunately, the security situation has not improved drastically. We still see suicide attacks. It's very unfortunate. ISIL-K has risen. And we do see civilians being killed, and they're still targeted. We also see that the civic space for media is getting constrained. We see on a daily basis reports arriving where strong and vocal journalists have been not allowed to report on certain demonstrations that are happening. That's where it makes us to doubt how the future would look like. But one thing for me personally, and I think for majority of Afghan women in the younger generation, that we still do not want to give up hope, and we still think about the future, is the strong voice that the youth in the women still carry, the civil society that carries, the media that still has the strongest power that they have to keep and make the leaders responsible for their actions. I think that's where I still want to keep my hope. That's where I still want to be optimistic. That's where I still want to see a brighter and a better future. But I know if they're not supported, if that space is not sustained for them, it's going to be very, very difficult. Second potential, not so much of a hopeful future, is the economic crises. We unfortunately have seen in last few months, the humanitarian crises have become extremely intense. And it was before August 15, we already had the figure, which was about 18 million Afghans, which the formal total population is around 30 million, and it's more than half of the million that were facing dire humanitarian crises. Post August 15, and all the economic challenges that are arriving right now, the lack of bankings being able to operate, the lack of cash being available in the market, the lack of food being available in the market as well, the lack of formal economies being able to function. It really has made the humanitarian and the economic situation even more dire. It's a country right now that majority of the population and the public are suffering, for sure. Besides that, they're starting to lose their political space and political freedom. I think there is truly a major concern on how families should feed their children and how they survive. So at this moment, I think one prospect we may see in the future would be that And economic prosperity would be definitely hard to predict and expect that Afghanistan will prosper. State and institutions are still struggling. We have lost a large number of our civil servants who are working in the government, and they do not see themselves anymore as part of the current regime in the leadership. And by default, they're losing the hope, and they're starting to leave the country. We have seen with all the figures we have in front of us. That's going to be a major challenge in the future. But still, if we are able to overcome the humanitarian crises, which I'm going to add one more element, and that is winter. Winter is arriving, and Afghanistan always had a very harsh winter, and global warming has truly affected Afghanistan, but by not having the right amount of rain, and that will help to grow and cultivate wheat and foods and agricultural products that will help an agrarian society like Afghanistan. And all this brings us to a very difficult and complex space where you do not see a better prospect for better security. I would say probably it has improved than before because the level of suicide attacks have reduced after August 15, but they haven't stopped. There is a drastic rise, as I said, in ISIL-K attacks. Second, as I said, the civic space is shrinking, and that's, I think, very clear. Third, women are losing their voices and their space. Fourth, there's still challenge for half of the population to be able to be educated and be the economic drivers in the country, and that are women. And similarly, I think overall the economic situation plus the humanitarian crisis does not keep us or make us very, very optimistic. It's very hard when you look into all this and you still want to keep your hopes high. But I do want to keep my hopes high because one thing for sure changed in the last 20 years, it was the people of Afghanistan. We truly have moved from a society where we lived in civil war and we lived in darkness and tyranny, but we moved forward to a society where, as I mentioned, those four pillars truly brought the right change that any country wishes to see in their, or any country wishes to see in their homeland or in their, among their population. And that's, I think, where we can keep our hope, because Afghanistan make about 70% of the population or the younger generation, and it is the majority. So my hope is, and I think the hope of all of us, if we provide the needed support for those who are inside the country, and I think I constantly emphasize that it's extremely important to think of those who are in the country, because I was there 25 years ago and I exactly know how it feels and what it means to be living in such a situation. To make sure that the support is provided to them, to make sure that they are not faded away, to make sure that they still keep their hopes high. I think the pause that has arrived right now, I'm confident it will be pushed away, and there will be a brighter future. There will be where the majority will finally be able to make the right change. So I think despite all what I taught in terms of not much of a lighter and brighter future, or what do I expect in the long run, but I still wanted to keep my hopes high for the new Afghanistan. And I have my hopes high because I trust and believe and the support that you all have extended 20 years ago, and you are our allies and friends individually. I've met most of those who had served in Afghanistan, and they still continue to be worried about the situation. And I do know we have made the largest investment and the longest investment, and we simply cannot let it go that easily, and it won't be washed away. It won't be gone. So I'm going to end my conversation hoping with some hopeful thoughts, but I look forward to get questions from the audience and students, which I am hoping they are not too bored and were able to follow some of the conversation. And I will be more than happy to answer any question that you may have. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome, Ambassador Raz, and thank you very much for your insights on comprehensive review of Afghanistan and the future that may lie ahead. We would now like to open the question and answer session to our audience. Our participants can find the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom window where you can add your question. Again, we will try to get to as many questions as we can, but I will start off by asking the first question. We're interested in your thoughts on the new Afghan-US relationship.
I'm sorry, I just missed it. Apologies.
We are interested in your thoughts on the new Afghan-US relationship.
It's a very important question. I think it is a new relation. It definitely is, but my hope is that the foundation of that relation would be the people of Afghanistan. What so far has been achieved in works and the counterparts and the contacts with those who are still thriving for a better Afghanistan. And as I said, it's the women, the youth, civil society, in the media. I really hope that that relationship continues. The second, in terms of formal relationship, I think it's a very difficult space that right now the US government is, because I always say it's a catch-22 type of situation, because here we are, there is a regime in power in Afghanistan that doesn't believe in the values that here we always have advocated for and fought for and thought about it and started working on when we haven't given up. It's a regime that they're pretty good in how to speak, and they have developed excellent skills in terms of communication, and their communication in Doha was also very progressive compared to what we see right now in practice. So I think, for me personally, probably I would say continuing to engage in Afghanistan is extremely critical. That needs to be there. It's not a small country, it's not a small nation, it's a bigger nation. But I think it's also extremely important that we must make sure that the achievements which we have been always speaking about, that we have made in the last 20 years, it's not washed away, it's maintained. And through various means that we have right now here to pressure Taliban to follow those. And third, I think one thing I'm extremely cautious, and I highlight it to everyone in my capacity the way I can and I'm able to, is that the focus on humanitarian situation should be there. I think we must make sure that humanitarian aid is not politicized. We have so many examples around the world that where humanitarian aid has been politicized and sometimes taken into a hostage. And as a result, it's those that have nothing to do with any of the political positions, and those are civilians and a regular public, that they pay the highest price. And I'm really afraid that that should not happen in Afghanistan, both ways, I think. I would say from the donor community and as well as from the Taliban too, because we know by facts and figures that right now people need food, and the food needs to be delivered without much of a condition. But we have a lot of other leverages that we could definitely utilize and use towards Taliban in terms of that they must accept the 21st century Afghanistan, the Afghanistan of today, the Afghanistan of the new Afghanistan, the way we call it, because otherwise, I always say it's easy to win militarily, but it's very, very hard to govern in a civil way, because then you have people and citizens who would come and ask and demand for things that the state needs to deliver.
Thank you. First question from our audience. Of the 4 pillars that you outlined as representative of Afghans' hope for a prosperous future, which do you believe will be the most difficult one for the new Afghan leadership to embrace?
I would say woman. I think probably all 4, but if I rank it, probably the first one will be woman. The second one would be civil society, following, or media second, and then civil society, and the 4th is youth. Because we already see it's hard for women to be where they were before. So they're raising their voices, and regardless how much we have advocated for their rights here and outside of Afghanistan, and how much they have advocated for their own rights, and not beyond advocation, I think they fought for it. They're still fighting. Demonstration today in the current regime in Afghanistan, it's pretty complex, but they do that. And to me, that's a fight that they have staged, but they still have not been able to see much of a change. Media have already started to adjust themselves to the expectations of the new regime. And to me, I think the entertainment part is absolutely fine. We are at the crossroad where we all need to make certain compromises. But I think the political freedom needs to be protected. And that's my biggest fear. It probably will hit soon. In terms of civil society, the same. It's they will be questioning regime's decision on human rights, targeted killings, which still continue in certain places. That they will raise their voice, and I don't know for how long they will be able to be that space where they need to maintain the right change and direction in Afghanistan. In youth, I think for sure, even if we look into the current formation of the cabinet of the regime, you barely see a younger, educated Afghan as part of the new cabinet. And I think that's where going to be a big challenge.
Thank you. Our next question, could you please update us on the status of infrastructure within your country?
Sure. If we compare Afghanistan of today compared to 25 years ago, I think in terms of comparison where Taliban came 25 years ago and where they are today, the infrastructure have improved drastically, that's for sure. Roads built, institutions are established, and in terms of government ability to provide service to outside of the urban cities have improved drastically. That's for sure. But I think if we look from an economic perspective, because there is a part of my educational background is on economic development. If we look from the economic perspective, even countries with semi-established infrastructure, where Afghanistan is right now, but of course it's very rarely possible to compare to any other even developing country, because I think we fall into below a rate in that. But if we compare to 25 years ago, huge difference. But it will be always challenging to use those infrastructure if the right economic policy is not in place. And And I do not see as of now there is even a thought behind what type of economic policies will be in place or how these infrastructures would be utilized. We do hear the conversation on one of our big gas pipeline that's going to come from Central Asia and go to South Asia, which is an excellent project. But I think because for especially for Afghan population, this conversation has been going on even first time when Taliban came into power. So in last 20 years as well, and now, and I think when it materializes, probably it will create greater confidence than now having a discussion about it.
Thank you. Our next question, as a woman in a patriarchal society, what are your challenges and how do you engage in discussions with the Afghan administration?
Well, this is my favorite question. Look, there's no end to challenges. On a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis, I deal with it. I'm just, even today, I had to really manage a big crisis in my own office because majority of my colleagues are men. And in a patriarchal, male-dominant society, woman leadership is not an easy one. And I don't want to say only probably here or my previous job or the job before. As far as any Afghan woman, remember when they take their first step towards a work outside of their home, and sometimes even at home there are challenges. But luckily, I grew up in a family where those didn't exist in our respective life by age than our gender, and you struggle with that. But one of the solutions I found, at least I'm going to share here with students, is that I started to speak to people, other women leaders, even outside of Afghanistan, because I think women leadership is always not an easy one. It's a difficult one. So it was helpful for me to speak to other women leaders and get their experiences and hear from them, and then basically learn how I can strengthen my position. But there have been never end, and I don't think so there will be ever end to it. And I think it's not even specific to one government versus another, or one individual versus another. I think it's an ideology and it's a mentality that's so set, and it's going to take quite some time for that to change. I'm really hoping when my daughters start to work, they will be working in a better space than I have done. But that's keeping my fingers crossed. I'm not so sure.
Thank you. Ambassador, as a follow-on question, what can we do in academia to help Afghan women?
Thank you. I think this is a really, really important question. Look, you, in a society like here, where education has arrived at the excellent quality, and where tolerance for discussion and knowledge sharing has moved up, and there is this I would say luxury, because I come from a country where learning or education is not a luxury, it's almost a scarce resources. And I know in the US it could be scarce as well, but still there's still opportunities more than many other countries outside of the US. Having the conversation alive and keeping it constantly enriched with discussions and new findings and information, and engaging Afghan women as well in these academic discussion on not only the rights of women. I think in any country, and especially in my country, if we look into the percentage of what percent are women in Afghanistan, the formal figure says 45, but if we just simply think of a country that has been in war for more than 4 decades, and most of those wars were waged by men and they were in the front line. So it should be a little bit more than 45%, but even if we say half of the population or women. And if these have, just logically, not because it's a good thing to engage them, but it's just if these half of the population are not engaged in the society, even for the sake of economic development, then it's extremely hard to predict prosperity and sustainability. And that's simply a very simple, straightforward debate on, for a country like Afghanistan, which is extremely poor and always is looking for ways on how to feed its population. But if we go to debate on the security, peace, conflict prevention, that becomes even more sophisticated and even more important and critical to have women as part of the conversation. And so it's simply saying, with greater evidence, with greater data, that this is needed rather than that this is a good thing to do.
Thank you. Our final question, we have many students attending your presentation today who are interested in careers in international business. What skills and competencies do you feel will help them succeed in today's global economy?
Good question. And I don't, I want to advise rightly them because look, I did my bachelor, I did triple majors in my bachelor. I did economics, political science, and international relations because I just thought they were so interconnected to each other. But I'm not recommending this to anyone to do so because I think it's extremely important that one knows what they're very keen and interested and then explores that field. So from my perspective, I believe, liberal overall will help in IR and political science and economic development, and economic studies will definitely help one to move in the path of foreign services or a diplomatic career, or even in the broader spectrum of international relations. And I think, but most importantly, a lot of time it's also they concentrate their masters or even further extended education on this career path, because one thing at least I learned in my life was that I switched between what I really wanted, because I wanted to be a lawyer initially, and then I realized that's not I'm good at. So then I focused on international relations and economic development, and I'm still enjoying it. This is something I'm extremely passionate about it. And the field is so broad, and we live in the 21st century. I think globalization is becoming an extremely important element of our life, and we have various international organizations. And I must tell the students, especially coming from the UN, it really needs fresh and young energy with thoughts and views to energize these big international organizations in order to respond to the needs and demands of where we live and how we live these days. So that would be my very, very humble opinion and advice and suggestion. But how could I advise anything in front of you, Dean Welch? Look, you come from knowledge of wealth and experience and education, and I'm still young and learning.
Make me feel a little old. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Ross. This concludes our question and answer session. Do you have any final comments that you would like to share with our audience?
No, but I think my final, there will not much of a comment, but words of gratitude. I think post August 15, as I said, it has been a difficult time for all of us. In the US, you all stood with us in the last 20 years. And it's for sure, it's tiring. You do need to conclude the chapter, and I think you have the full right. And But it's also hard to think, have you done the right thing? And my answer to you would be absolutely, because I hear this question from so many people and they ask me. And my answer is, look, even from perspective of Afghans, where we are really in the middle of this pain, we still think the 20 years were not lost. Those investments have really paid off. You have changed lives. You have changed a generation. There is a new country. It's a new Afghanistan, and no matter what, it's gonna be hard, difficult days, but we'll move out of it, and we will sustain back what we have achieved. So my words would be words of gratitude, and my humble request would be to have this people-to-people contact. There is much richer conversation inside Afghanistan in these days. I think media is trying to do their best, but it's very hard also to capture what's happening within lives of so many people who are still trying to make the right change and big difference. So that would be my final comment.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank Ambassador Ross for her time and her very interesting and informative presentation. I also want to thank President De La Torre, Chinye Hostler, and the Charles W. Hostler Institute on World Affairs for hosting this timely and very relevant event. We look forward to all our students, faculty, and community members joining us for future events. This concludes our program, and I want to thank you all for attending this excellent seminar.